Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode, we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great tackle! He's done it! Oh, brilliant play! Wiggling his way, and that's an excellent ball, and Didi! It's a goal for Clyde back. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Kenny.
Our guest this week is a football journalist who writes for The Times, World Soccer, Kicker and the Sunday Herald. He's also written many articles for Shoot magazine in the past. Welcome, Phil Gordon.
Hi Andy, hi Tom.
Hi, thanks for coming on, Phil.
Yeah, I'm sort of almost a long-held dream. Well, I dreamed for about a year since Andy floated the idea.
Yeah. Now, listen, thank you for joining us. As you say, it has been a long time coming, so hopefully it will be everything that we all hope it would be. So there we go. We've picked out a Shoot magazine from the 12th of March 1983 for yourself. So what we'll do is we'll start from the front cover, and it's dominated by a photo of Ian Rush in full flow for Liverpool. He's wearing a red Umbro kit with white vertical pinstripes and white piping down the shoulder. The Umbro logo and Liverpool badge are both in yellow, and the photo is accompanied by the heading Ian Rush on goals. There's also another photograph on the cover which shows Man City's Kevin Reeves shadowed by Norwich defender Dave Watson, the Everton Dave Watson. The Man City kit is an all blue shiny Umbro kit with white piping across the shoulder. The Norwich kit is an Adidas one, yellowy green pinstripes and Adidas 3 stripes down the arm. It's accompanied with the heading What Hope for Man City. So the other features on the front cover are Alan Clark's shock comeback. The feature looks at ex-Leeds United's Alan Clark, who's back in the game managing at Scunthorpe. The stars recall their baptism of fire, so inside Shoot takes a look at a number of players' debuts, including Celtic's Tommy Burns, Everton's Dave Johnson and West Brom's Cyril Regis. And last but not least, the cover price is 30 pence. It's a cracking, I love it. It's a very colourful front cover, isn't it?
It's brilliant. It's quite hard to do sometimes. You know, when you get involved in magazines or even programs or things like that, the cover is a big deal and quite hard to do sometimes to get it right. But it has to be colourful.
Yeah.
And the sort of motto that I was always given when I was working in newspapers or particularly magazines, it has to stand out on the shelf. It has to be that, capture the imagination. So you can't say anything other than that for this one, because it really does. You know, that Liverpool red strip is a iconic kit, obviously. So is the Man City one, to be honest. They're all very much, and with retro kits coming back in now, those are the kind of kits that sort of millennials will probably be happy to pay 50 quid for, you know.
Yeah. It's definitely the three kits on display there are, the word you use there is iconic, and we seem to say it every single week that we do these, Tom. It's the iconic kit, but those are, I mean, it's the Man City kit for me is my favourite Man City kit, probably quite easily my favourite Man City kit. But again, about something we spoke about, I certainly have a lot of the times, is the photograph of Ian Rush, and even the other photograph. It's not high definition pinpoint quality. It's blurry. There's something about it, and I really like that look where it's not just a perfectly focused photograph, but there's something magical about it.
Now, obviously, they were always very. I think particularly with at that early 80s, all the kit people were very kind of switched on to product placement, for lack of a better word, to try and get their things in places where people would see the boots that were on. Ian Rush has got Adidas boots, and the kits. You wouldn't want some. I think it's probably part of the problem later on that does happen in with sponsorship. getting in the way of stuff. If you look at Ian Rush, there's not a thing in the way of that or the Liverpool badge either.
Yeah.
You know, they're so pristine that they stand out beautifully.
Yeah. The other thing I would say about those kits is I think that's Umbro when they've just stopped doing the kind of tram lines they used to do down the sleeves with the diamonds, but this year they've stopped doing that, which is interesting considering, you know, they were hammering home their diamond logo at the time, but you couldn't imagine that Liverpool shirt with those diamonds down the sleeves kind of thing. It just looks that bit.
Actually, it was one of the sort of if you're older like me in the 70s, with the sort of ones where they started kicking out into the diamonds down the sleeves, and club, certainly Scotland, Argentina, sort of 78, that was maybe one of the first ones, and certainly early 80s. I know for a fact that certainly Celtics had a green one, like with the diamonds going down, and Hearts, I think, had their one with the white going down the side. But at that stage, you know, I think there was only a few teams could actually get it. It wasn't every team got the opportunity of kind of like being snazzy or even got the opportunity to have Adidas, because at those stages, you know, they didn't really hand out their kits easily. It was only in the 80s once they started to sort of really make sure they were trying to get the best brand anywhere.
I think something it's just sort of occurred to me is, and it's maybe worth a bit of research of that. Somebody somewhere will know, but the socks seem to retain the diamonds on them longer than anything else. And I remember one of the Clydebank kits was still using them, or maybe that was actually because, in fact, there was a photograph where I think we were using the previous season's socks because they hadn't arrived. But it does seem to be, and this kit, the red socks do have the diamonds, and that seems to went on for a little bit longer, for quite a few years, I think.
Obviously, yeah. I think that was the easy way for instead of just making a kit like all red or whatever, you know, all black or whatever they used to have. The diamond offered just the chance to have a wee like colour contrast, so you know, you could stick it in there in white or whatever. Or Everton, for example, seem to remember they had a kind of nice, but at the same time, a change kit of yellow and blue, and again, I think it did the diamonds alternately, you know, like on the socks, etc.
Yeah. Well, just mentioning the badge and it's a strange thing that it's yellow on the white as well, isn't it? As well, I mean, it's not strange as in it's bad, but it's just a bit unusual.
I think at the time, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd have to do my research on it, but I think you know. Ironically, my younger brother, Kenny, who I shared a room with, was a Liverpool fan, and so, you know, I used to see a lot sitting across the bedroom from me. But I genuinely think possibly Liverpool were one of those teams in the early 80s where the badge colour might change. You know, the clubs go through a sort of a bit of a revamp. And try maybe now that particularly with Liverpool, once they started winning a couple of European Cups and become very big, you know, and around the world wide, to get that you know, that recognition of their badge. So possibly that made it stand out, you know, from it just being white.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Okay, but we'll jump inside pages 2 and 3. I'm going to look at page 3 first on the shoot view. So this is a little editorial bit. And the heading is Plastic Peril. So Shoot discusses whether QPR will be allowed to keep their plastic pitch should they gain promotion to the First Division. Some managers have expressed their displeasure at the Astro pitch, including Oldham Athletics' Joe Royle and Barnsley's Norman Hunter, after both teams experienced defeat there. Just as a little bit of a spoiler, QPR would keep the AstroTurf pitch until 1988. And Oldham Athletic would themselves install Astro in 1986, which coincided with what's regarded as one of the best ever periods for the club. So I guess I imagine that the opinion changed pretty quickly of Joe Royle on the pitches after Oldham did okay there.
Obviously, yeah, you can see how that it was two older, harder players who became managers, old school managers. Well, Norman Hunter, obviously the kind of player that didn't need grass to
Yeah.
to mete out his revenge on people. But obviously, Joe Royle. Joe Royle might have struggled as a player because he was a big guy and one of those centre forwards that like to turn people. And I can imagine on AstroTurf as a player, his knees would have gone possibly. So maybe that's. But yeah, everybody likes to hate them, and then until they get on a winning run, it's a big debate. It's a big debate now in Scotland, obviously, because we've probably got more AstroTurf pitches than we want at top level. They're a great. I think they're a great boon. I've seen how they work at places like Stenhousemuir on all the coaching things and everything. But in the 80s, obviously, very few and far between. You were lucky in terms of the fact that when I read this up, I kind of had a Me Too moment. I suddenly thought, I was there. So QPR, I just happened to be there that season. I'll give you a kind of backstory that 82, 83, when I'd finished my degree at uni, I was doing modern history. And the only way to get into journalism was to do like a postgrad course. So the one that was on offer was in London, and I kind of went down there, stayed and worked, did a course for a year. And when I was there, I kind of met up with another guy that came from Scotland, a guy called Roddy McDougall, and he was a Hearts fan. So we would basically spend most of our Saturdays, not every Saturday, but going around other sort of grounds in London to kind of get a first taste of see what you could maybe not see very often. And we actually ended up going to QPR's. And I remember we went to at that time I think they actually romped away with the promotion, but at that time Fulham were one of the contenders, and Roddy and I went to a game at Loftus Road on a sort of April. I think it was Holiday Monday, and basically they beat Fulham. That was a Fulham team had with Ray Houghton in it. Castlemilk's Ray Houghton. So he was just breaking through at that time, and so it was kind of quite interesting, but it was very obvious. I suppose a wee bit as we have now, like with the likes of Livingston, knowing how to play it really very cutely. It's not just the case that, and they've got a lot of good football players at Livingston. I think QPR were the same as well. So I was kind of lucky actually seeing that, and when I leapt on the shoot view when I saw it, because it was one of those things. I actually, if you guys are way too young to even remember how bad AstroTurfs, the beginning of AstroTurf parts in the 80s were suicidal, is the best way to put it, because they were just, they were so hard, and they hadn't, and basically I think the problem always was that I can certainly remember a couple of times. I think part of the problem was most people who played like five-a-sides like myself, it was indoors. You didn't have many outdoors, so you're only, if you played five-a-side, that was indoors. You played football on grass, and the only other, so you didn't really come across many. And I can actually remember one of the first kind of AstroTurfs that I played on, 1986, and it was out in the east end of Glasgow. In fact, the one at Helenvale, I think Celtic used to use it for the reserve games and whatever. But I remember playing a bounce game out there on a very hot a Thursday night one time in the summertime, and going for a slide tackle, and I can still remember the burns to this day. It wasn't helped, it should be added, by the very 1980s short shorts. It didn't give you any leeway or protection. So I actually kind of think, when I see the stuff that my son played on, and his school basically had us, AstroTurf was their go-to surface after a while. I think actually the guys who were in the 80s like myself, we should be getting some sort of pioneer award, for putting our bodies beyond for medical science kind of thing.
It's definitely, there's no doubt it's improved beyond, I mean, I've played in the old Anfield, the Stirling Albion pitch, which would have been similar to that. Too, and it's brutal. It's for any position you play in, goalkeeper, outfield, whatever, it's brutal on your limbs, it's brutal on your legs, your skin, everything like that. Nowadays, The pitches I played on are so much better and are actually quite good to play on at times, but they're not better than a good grass pitch.
And that's why you always it's and I know we all kind of have it's I know that you guys like myself probably watch the old sort of on BT Sport the match of the day, the thing, and the first thing you always notice when you go back 60s, 70s, 80s, you go, oh my god, how bad is that grass park? You know, like Justin Fashanu like scoring goal of the season at Carrow Road, but it's popped up about 4 feet for his first touch. No wonder they're all having this. So you always had this kind of thing where it was a bit of a, you never really knew what it was you were getting.
Yeah.
But yeah, from our point of view, like, yeah, we've got, I mean, I was playing five-a-sides in Astro until about 2017. That's when I had to stop playing. But even now, you would be thinking, there's no way anything, it's not comparable with that. I think the one they were talking about at QPR. But I always know that, yeah, I think that as fans are going around Scottish clubs, we always kind of realise when Kilmarnock used to have a very good reputation for a really good grass surface, and then obviously now that's gone.
Yeah.
I think they're one of the teams that genuinely, having covered a few games at Rugby Park this season, I think they're actually one of the teams that could benefit from going back to grass.
Yeah.
I think the other one that has been the biggest improvement was Motherwell. It used to be the worst surface by a distance because it's in such a really difficult part of terrain. There's a big steep drop from not just from side to side on the park, but from one end to the other. You know, a bit like your old Easter Road slopes or Tannadice slopes or whatever. So Motherwell, I must admit, has definitely takes away the near enough top prize for what the surface recently. But I think most of them are very, very good.
Yeah.
You know, and they put in a lot of work in it and a lot of, yeah, I think we're all agreed that we'd just rather watch it on a grass park.
No, definitely. And I think I've probably talked about this before. The technology for pitches and stuff has improved so much so that you see amateur teams that aren't even senior teams having really good quality pitches because they've got the equipment, they've got the technology in terms of fertiliser, whatever else they need to do. And you just think like Morton, I think are well known for having a cracking pitch as well, as you say, Motherwell. And you just think, with the improvements in the technology, then maybe these other teams could have held out. I get that it's a cost thing as well, because you want to try and use them for other avenues, and you don't want to have teams playing on your pitch to mess it up and stuff like that. So I get all that side of things, but as you say, at the end of the day, people want to play on grass, and people want to see the game played on grass, and you've got to give the paying public what they want, or else they'll go away.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's not just at the bottom level though, because we would all want to see there's nothing better than, particularly this time of year, May or June, go down and watching a game on grass, but you wouldn't really go and choose to sort of watch it on AstroTurf.
Yeah,
it's not. It's just, it's kind of like it's okay, but yeah, it's not really the best thing.
So in other words, I think we're on Norman Hunter, and we're on their side, aren't we? So yeah, that shows you how old school we are. Right, moving on to the other two pages. So pages 2 and 3 is it's Man City Crisis or Crossroads, and a series of articles over the 2 pages. Shoot looks at the problems facing Man City's new manager John Benson. The main article talks about the lack of depth and quality in the squad, with a number of senior players not having youngsters coming through to replace them. Some of the seniors mentioned include Tommy Hutchison, Jerry Gow and Dennis Stewart, while injuries to some key buys such as Trevor Francis and Phil Boyer have added to the woes that face Benson. So one of the articles is Allison's mistake. This is about Malcolm Allison. It says Malcolm Allison's buys at City are criticised in this article. They managed them for a second time between 1979 and 80 and was responsible for what Shoot refers to as, quote, the most disastrous shopping expedition football has ever seen. That's quite a statement, that. Stephen Daly he bought for 1.2 million and sold for around 300,000. Michael Robinson was bought for 750,000 and sold for half of that. He also paid 250,000 for Steve McKenzie, who at the time was trying to break into the Crystal Palace reserve team. Allison naturally is convinced that he would have made City great again if he'd been given longer, saying he thought things were just coming right at the time that he got the push. It's some. I mean, we do talk about Malcolm Allison every now and then on this, and he seems to be quite a character, quite a confident guy, and you know, he's if there's one thing that I've learnt is that he's very confident in his ability, no matter how that ability is actually, you know, being shown to actually not being that great. But yeah, the next article. Sorry.
Emperor's New Clothes is what you maybe trying to hint at.
Yeah, he's some guy. But the next one, Big Joe Corrigan here, he talks about Malcolm Allison as well. So he's been the first choice keeper in 14 years at the club. He looks at the difference between them and their City rivals Man United and sympathises with ex-manager John Bond, who must have found it frustrating looking at the gap between the two teams and squads. Corrigan lays a lot of the blame for City's woes at the feet of Malcolm Allison, saying, "We were going along nicely under Tony Book and I thought we were close to being there. Then, all of a sudden, Malcolm came back for a second spell and tore everything to pieces." The chairman, Peter Swales, in the next article, he backs up Corrigan. And he says, "It was a mistake to bring Malcolm back and we are paying for it." Now, just as a spoiler, Man City would end up being relegated this season along with Swansea and Brighton. They were relegated in May by Luton Town to see their 17-year stay at the top division brought to an end. Now, while the magazine is dated the 12th of March, they're also previewing the City versus United game that took place on the 6th of March, with Brian Robson weighing in with his thoughts later on in the magazine. United would go on to win that game 2-1. Now, just touching on the current manager of Man City there, John Benson, he was actually a Scot. He was born in Arbroath in 1942. He played for right back for Man City between 61 and 64. Moved to Torquay, then to Bournemouth, then to Norwich City, and then back to Bournemouth, where he would be player manager.
Because I think he was a contemporary of maybe Harry Redknapp or something like that. Had
Yep.
no idea he was a Scot. There you go.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
So he was replaced by City at the end of this season after they were relegated, before having spells managing at Burnley, Al Nassr of Kuwait and Wigan Athletic. So I guess this whole article about Man City and the problems is really a big blame for Malcolm Allison, isn't it? That seems to be what's going on here.
Well, they were obviously a big spending team at the time, and I think, and I was going to say when you look at the cover, it's kind of ironic that you know, that there was the cover saying that City could be going down, which they did. But look at Man City now. You know, they went down to the third tier, and now they're about to play in a Champions League final. I think the problem for Man City of that era was that they were only 10 years or so after a team that had won the Cup Winners' Cup, won the English title, had been, you know, and not just that, they were always kind of like the entertaining team. They were always like the I suppose we always have a team in every country that we call like a football team or whatever. And if West Ham maybe got it, Man City definitely had it, because in the 70s, even, you know, they brought Rodney Marsh up from I think QPR or Fulham. I'm trying to remember which team, but he came up from London. He was a total Cockney. You know, there wasn't any sort of Manchester bone in his body, but he was one of those sort of entertainers that they added to kind of keep the main road crowd happy. So like, it was a fall from grace, and that's why it felt such a sting at the time. But yeah, famously, obviously, at the end of the season, that was the famous Luton Town, and I've seen it not that long ago with the Radiantich goal scoring in the 92nd minute or something, and David Pleat, the Luton manager, the badly dressed Luton manager. There's a competition for a lot of badly dressed managers out there, but I think David Pleat definitely kicked it off into gear with his sort of dance across the turf at Main Road to celebrate with the Luton players.
Yeah. So there we go. We've learned that John Benson is a Fifer, so that's a good one. Yeah, there we go. So moving on to pages 4 and 5. This is Scoring Goals My Way by Ian Rush. So Ian Rush, who by this point in the season has scored 26 goals in all competition, analyses his goals and their significance. So he picks out a game against Everton in November when he scored 4 goals, 3 of them with his weaker left foot. Now, with his right foot, he picks out a 4-0 win at Swansea, which he says was a turning point for the season. For his best goal, he picks out a 25-yarder against Exeter in the Milk Cup. His most significant was his first for the club in a 7-0 victory over Oulu of Finland in a European Cup tie. Now, the 4 goals against Everton are once again mentioned as the most satisfying. He mentions that he supported Everton as a kid, which added to the satisfaction. Another goal against Everton, this time when they were 2-1 up. This is mentioned as his luckiest goal. He says, I remember David Johnson busting into the penalty area. His shot was deflected by a defender, but it hit my shoulder and rocketed in. It's the age-old question, is your shoulder part of your arm? So is he just admitting to that?
Handball.
Yep, there we go. VAR. Time for VAR. As for the best goal he has seen, he picks Glenn Hoddle's goal for Spurs against Man United in the 79-80 League Cup, saying, Ardiles helped conjure up some magic from a free kick just outside the box. Glenn beat Gary Bailey with a tremendous volley. Does anybody remember that goal?
Vaguely. My best Glenn Hoddle one was he scored one against Watford at Vicarage Road, which is like a kind of just somebody kind of knocks it in from the side of the 18-yard box, and I think he takes one of those sort of flicks up over a defender with one foot and kind of volleys it with the left.
Yeah.
So I remember that one. I think the Man against Man, so that might be a midweek cup game, so harder for me to remember the Manchester United.
So while we're on the main man that we're talking about here, Ian Rush, have we got any memories of Ian Rush? Any thoughts on him?
As I say, more somebody that I saw on the TV, particularly kind of at that time. You're aware of kind of whose sort of shoes he was filling, because obviously, as I say, my brother was a Liverpool fan, so I kind of knew the sort of Liverpool players in the 1970s, and then obviously they took Kenny Dalglish from Celtic, which was very, very bad. It was a very upsetting day in my house, particularly because my brother asked if he could have my Kenny Dalglish poster. I told him where he could. Liverpool then went on and basically kind of added. They were almost like, once they started winning European Cups, there was almost like cherry picking the best players that they could find. Although Ian Rush came very much from kind of lower level, I think they were able to kind of experiment a wee bit then, because they weren't under the same sort of pressure now. I actually think that the converse is true now. I don't think European champions anywhere, where you have Liverpool or Barcelona, or Barcelona probably a bad example because they really have overspent. I don't think you got allowed to go and get a signing from Chester or wherever. I think the fans get upset and want the big signing who cost like 60 or 80 million.
Yeah.
So in a way, and Ian Rush proved everybody right, because that was one of the record goal scorers, and when he came back from Juventus, he was the guy who famously went to Italy and said the one thing he didn't like about it was having to speak Italian, obviously, but when he came back, to Anfield the second time, he was a superb striker.
There was another famous quote from him about the food. What was it? Something.
Too much Italian food or something like that.
And I'm sure he used to get. Don't know if it was beans or something sent over. There was something like that. Cans of beans or cans of something like that. I'm sort of thinking like spaghetti hoops or that, which would have been the ultimate slap in the face for the Italians, I guess.
Well, that is, if you go to Italy, you realise the one thing you don't have to worry too much about is the food.
Yeah,
it is the one thing you would move for.
Definitely. Okay, next page, she's 6 and 7, so there's quite a lot in here. So this is Inside Football with Mark Irwin. So there's lots of little stories and stuff. And the first one I'm going to look at is this first article with an accompanying photo is quite a poignant one. It shows former Man United goalkeeper Harry Gregg giving a hug to Miss Vera Lukic and her daughter Vesna. Now, Harry pulled the 2 Yugoslav women from the Munich air disaster 25 years previous to this magazine. Vesna was only 20 months at the time, and it was her great ambition to meet and thank Harry in person. And so it's got a photograph of Harry with both ladies having a wee bit of cuddle there, and I think that's just a great wee story to start off there.
Harry Gregg died recently, didn't he? One of the many who have died.
Yeah, I think Bobby Charlton's the only survivor left now.
Yeah,
from Munich.
Yeah, but Harry Gregg was one of those people who I knew from the sort of because of the books I had read about the survivors from Munich, and I think at the time I didn't appreciate. It was only later on, having read what he actually did. He was literally pulling people out of burning a burning aircraft. At the time, when I was catching up on him, you just think, all right, he's a survivor. He's one of the guys that survived and went on to have a career. But yeah, that's quite a nice story. So, and as I say, I think Harry Gregg died very much recently. Very much kind of loved in Northern Ireland. I think he went back there to kind of to live after his career.
Okay, the next one is another sad one. So this is it's a derby game between First Division Sunderland and Second Division Newcastle United. Could be one of the attractions at the home of Berwick Rangers towards the end of the season. This would be in aid of an appeal fund set up for paralysed striker 22-year-old Ian Cashmore. Now, Ian had moved to Berwick Rangers from Ayr United after initially being there on loan. After scoring 8 goals in 9 games, he broke his neck in a freak accident while training with Ayr United in December 1982. Even though he was confined to a wheelchair, he refused to give up football and put all his energy into youth development. Now, as it was Celtic who would actually go on to play Sunderland in a testimonial, which Sunderland would win 3-1. The Sunderland team included a young Ali McCoist, who was actually linked with a move to Parkhead at this time. And sadly, Ian died of cancer in 2014. I think it was around Kilwinning. I think he was sort of involved with Kilwinning Rangers, and that's where he was born as well. But a very, very, very sad story. And I've chatted to his son online before as well. It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is. It's one of those things where I don't think you could ever convince yourself that you could imagine yourself being in that situation. Just to lose your body, your function. The one thing that you're desperate to use it for, to run about and play football, even just if it was just for, kicking it, about at amateur level. I think always the sad thing was that at least people got round quite quickly to raise money, because certainly back in those days, I'm not sure how good the English PFA was so nothing like as powerful as it is now, and certainly not with the sort of financial thing as it's attained over the last few years. But obviously, with him being in Scotland, I'm not even sure that the SPFA would have had that amount of financial resources to even give to him. So you are relying, I suppose it's like crowdfunding in a way, isn't it? Somebody injures themselves out on holiday and people get together and try and raise £20,000 or £30,000 to get people home or an operation.
I think his son, it was Ian Junior. I think he played for Kilwinning Rangers as well, possibly. I don't know if he managed them, but I think he definitely played down that way, junior football. But okay, on to the next one, and we have a penalty marathon. So this is a wee story. It says a penalty marathon to decide the winners of an Inverness Cup semi-final between Caledonian and Clacknacudden looks like finding its way into the Scottish football's history books. After 90 minutes of regular time, followed by 30 minutes of extra time, It took another half hour and 30 penalties before Caledonian won through to the final by 12 penalties to 11. Inverness Caledonian would then go on to win the cup as well. I can't ever recall being at a football game where there's been penalty kicks. Have either of you?
Have you, Tom? No.
Clydebank got to the Junior Cup final in 2009 when a penalty shootout.
Can't remember what it was. Number of penalties, or
wasn't as many as. No, I've never been a penalty shootout that's went to the next round of players. It's went everybody's taking one and then.
The one I can remember reporting on, and it was one of those things. And again, it was like a Tuesday night. The one of these you hate as a journalist. You hate midweek. Like this one, I possibly might have been a midweek tie going to penalties, because that's your deadline up the Swanee, and you're praying. The one thing anybody in the press box usually says is, like, if it was an 83rd minute goal to break a 0-0, they're all going to thank God for that. No extra time in penalties. And the Scottish Cup this year has probably served up more penalty shootouts, I think, than any other before. But the one I remember covering was the semi-final of the League Cup, and that definitely went the second round of passed through the team, because the goalkeepers faced each other. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember. I think Lucas Zajuska was still playing at Dundee United, and Arthur Boric, his compatriot, was at Celtic, and I'm certain both of them took kicks.
Yeah,
I'm thinking possibly both scored. I don't think they were both kind of confident guys.
Yeah, Boric definitely scored. I remember his penalty.
Right. And keepers are confident guys now. It used to be that back in the old days, it was like they never really got the chance to touch the ball, but now half of them are. They can show how good they are with their feet. So yeah.
If I mind right, in that game, it was Willow Flood that missed with his second penalty. I think he scored for United with his first, and then he missed on his second.
Now that's almost like a given, isn't it? Because that's always you think, all right, I've done my bit.
All right, on to the next little article here. And Scotland have declined an invitation to take part in an 8-nation tournament in Cochin, also called Kochi, in India during March, so the month of the magazine. The competition was a bid to boost the interest in soccer in a predominantly cricket-loving region. The other teams that were invited were Iran, Romania, Hungary, Nigeria, Cameroon, China and Italy. Now, there's not many details available about this tournament, but some teams that did take part in the tournament were the Hungarian Olympic team, China under-19s, Cameroon, Romania and the Italian under-18 squad. Hungary would go on to win that one, so that's quite a mishmash of teams there. We've got under-18s, under-19s, an Olympic squad. Scotland could have just sent a representation, couldn't they have? And probably have won it.
You know what the SFA were like. It was probably they were thinking twofold. What happens if these guys do we have to if we give them caps or whatever, then have to give them money or whatever? Yeah. We don't want to go down that road. We'll decline.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So next one is a chance in New Zealand. So every now and then in various magazines throughout the years, you come across an article or an advert like this one, where a call out is made to footballers who want to try and make a career in another country, usually ones that are developing in the game. A previous one that I can think of, there was one for Sweden. Well, this one here is to encourage players to start a new challenge in New Zealand. Name and address details are provided for you to write for details. That's going to be a long, protracted way of getting it, writing a letter, going airmail to, or even shipping to New Zealand, waiting for the response. For that time, you're into the new season. Yeah.
We don't realise how lucky we are now in terms of communication.
But there would have definitely been just normal people reading this going, yeah, I quite fan. I think I could make it myself as a footballer. I know my other brother Peter would definitely be one of these, so if you're listening to this, Peter, I know you would have replied to this. Okay, on to the next one. It's about Trevor Steven, and it says teenage midfielder Trevor Steven is in no hurry to capitalise on the interest shown in him by several First Division clubs, including following Burnley's splendid Milk Cup run. The 19-year-old says, leaving Burnley is the last thing in my mind. The club has been good to me and I appreciate the chance I've been given to make a name for myself. I have a contract until 1984 and I don't envisage leaving before then. Now, there's a photograph of him here, and I don't think he's ever aged, is he, really? He doesn't look any different than he does there. He joined Everton in the summer of this year after failing to help Burnley being relegated back into the third division. Prevent Burnley being relegated back into the third division. Everton paid £300,000 for him. He played there until 1989, where he'd win the FA Cup in his first season, the league twice, the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup and the Charity Shield 4 times. From Everton he moved to Rangers between 89 and 91 for £1.5 million. He'd win 7 league championships and 2 Scottish League Cups, and he had a short stay in France between 91 and 92 where he'd win Ligue 1 before moving back to Rangers. And then when I looked all that up, I just couldn't believe how much he'd won.
He won the third division with Burnley as well. So I think in his sort of 13 years or something like that, he's won the title 10 times.
Yeah.
Well, he went at a time to Everton when they won it 3 times in 5 years. I mean, the title never left the city of Liverpool.
Yeah.
It was either Liverpool or Everton, and so I think you were basically thinking that if he won, was it twice at Everton the title, nobody else in English football, and then because he then came to Rangers, nobody else in English football was winning a title twice. You know, the only guys that were doing it then were Liverpool players. So that was quite a record to carry. And then obviously come to Scotland, where he was going to Scotland's most successful team at the time. So that was a stick on. My spoiler alert for this is I have to confess to knowing Trevor for a wee while, because the guy who used to be the editor of Shoot is a friend of mine. The late Dave Smith, he died a couple of years ago at the age of 56, which was quite sad. And Trevor was Dave's friend, and when he came to Rangers, he came up a few times, and basically I kind of went and did a couple of interviews with him. And a few years ago, I'd done a couple of interviews with Trevor to do with his Marseille time, because obviously that was one of the things. I certainly at the time when David Beckham was trying to win the title with PSG, I did a piece with Trevor, because at that point he was still the one of the few Englishmen to win, a title. So yeah, he basically, and he stayed here. I think he settled in Hamilton. A lot of people don't know. Hamilton's where my wife's from, and a lot of people surprisingly end up settling in Hamilton. He's not the kind of first person to sort of decide that he's kind of Scotland's quite a decent place to kind of stay.
Okay, on to the next little one. This is non-league Milford Everton star Noel Turley. He landed himself in hot water for kissing the referee. He was so excited when his team were awarded a penalty against Portadown that he gave the ref a hug and a kiss. The penalty helped them win the game, but unfortunately the referee booked Turley for his over-amorous affections. Well, what can we say about that? Football's an emotional game, isn't it? On to the next one. Alex Miller has been released from Rangers. So after 16 years with Rangers, Ibrox utility player Alex Miller has been released to take up a contract in Hong Kong, where he'll join with players such as Jimmy Bowen, Tommy Hutchison, Duncan Davidson and Derek Parlane. So a little bit about Alex. He played 197 times between 1968 and 82 in the league for Rangers. He moved to Morton for a short spell as player manager after his short period playing for South China in the Hong Kong League. But he also managed in that league as well. He then managed at St Mirren, Hibs and Aberdeen before spells in Japan, Sweden and Russia. He won the Scottish League Cup with Hibs in 91-92. And I know that he's not a manager that's loved by a lot of fans for teams that he's been at.
I think I think Alec Miller was maybe suffered a wee partly because he was a bit utilitarian in terms of his approach to putting out a team. You would probably say now, that was maybe quite clever, but particularly for Hibs fans, I remember covering that game, the one they put down, was the win over Dunfermline.
Yeah,
and I remember that, and the Hibs fans hadn't had a trophy for quite a while, but it still didn't prevent them kind of having a kind of he never won them over. Now whether that was because he was an ex-Rangers player, I don't really know. But I think Hibs are a wee bit, when we were talking about Man City earlier and West Ham. I know from certainly covering games at Easter Road that the Hibs fans kind of always feel they're sort of they want a better standard football to be watching.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's maybe what Alec Miller suffered from. But yeah, he's definitely not well remembered.
Sometimes you just can't win, can you? Give them a trophy. There we go. On to the next one. Liverpool have strengthened their already powerful reserve squad by signing 17-year-old Darren McLean from Highland League Inverness Thistle for £25,000, a record fee for a player from the Highland League. Now, as a wee spoiler, McLean didn't settle down south and moved to Dundee, where he'd spend a couple of seasons without making a first-team appearance. He returned to the Highland League, this time with Inverness Cali, before moving to Lossiemouth after failing to break into the first team at Cali. Another story of someone, the star shone bright very quickly and then faded away here, isn't it? It's not a name that I really... Well, I say it's not a name that I really remember, not a name that I remember.
Remember it? I didn't, no. I think part of the problem was, I certainly know from speaking to a couple of people that teams like Liverpool were all, quite a few people had sort of managers. Chelsea certainly had one late 70s, early 80s, a guy called Ian McNeil, and he came from the Highlands, and I'm pretty certain at a time when probably the Highlands were off the radar because Inverness wasn't in the Scottish League at that stage, that maybe they thought, this is worth a punt. But yeah, it'd be a big story. God, can you imagine that story now today? That don't get me wrong, guys. That is the equivalent of Liverpool signing a Boise Clyde Bank. It's not, but it's not a league kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not like paying 150 grand back in the day when it was a first division team, and so I think obviously it seems to me it's kind of interesting, as just what we mentioned about Ian Rush earlier on. Liverpool clearly they didn't like to spend money. It doesn't seem, but equally they seem to be quite happy to give trials to guys.
Yeah. Okay, on to the next one we're going to look at, and it's Poor Billy is the heading with this. So it's about Billy Kirkwood, and we've got a photograph of him accompanying it. And it says Dundee United boss Jim McLean has fined midfield Billy Kirkwood a staggering £250 for being booked in the Scottish Cup defeat at St Mirren. Under the SFA sponsorship scheme, a club forfeits £250 for every player booked and £500 for a sending off. McLean felt Kirkwood should pay the money himself. Now here's the cracker here. Kirkwood, who is a member of the Players' Union, will not appeal. I think he knows there's no point in that.
Exactly what the score is. Yeah,
it's not small amounts, that, isn't it? £250 and £500. That's quite substantial for the time.
I think that was United's basic wages. I think they might have been on like £200 a week at the time, because they used to be United with the team. In fact, that was the season they won the league. Spoiler alert! But they were the side who basically offered a low basic and topped it up with a very big win bonus. So I think you could get 3 or 4 times your wage by winning. So yeah, Jim McLean at that time was very much in his infancy, in terms of the way that he was able to get players to toe the line.
Yeah.
Obviously, a decade later, it was more of a struggle to convince them to do what he was telling them. So that as in telling them as opposed to asking them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Next one, Peter's goal. So this Rangers keeper Peter McCloy is chasing another record at Ibrox. He's approaching the legendary Jerry Dawson's record of 545 games for the Light Blues. McCloy has recently played his 527th match. So as a spoiler, McCloy played at Rangers from 1970 until 1986, joining after 6 years at Motherwell. He has 4 Scotland caps. Now, one source lists him as having made 544 appearances, which is one less than the Jerry Dawson's, but another has it as 545. So I went to Stephen Miller at the Rangers videos, and I knew I would get a definitive answer from him. So he told us that McCloy is the record holder. So well done, Peter McCloy, for that. John Gregg holds the record. So that's for the goalkeeper. John Gregg holds the records for the most appearances with 755 games.
John Gregg, I mean, it's obviously kind of stretched over almost 2 decades in terms of playing.
Yeah,
and one of the few players at the time that didn't avoided a lot of injury. That's what you've really got to do.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last one I think we're going to look at on this page is Stop Press. And it says Aston Villa are the latest club to take an interest in Clyde's 19-year-old left winger Pat Nevin. Conscious of competition from Everton, Spurs and Notts County, Villa have had Nevin watched and are ready to make a move. Now, as a spoiler, Chelsea pipped everyone to the post with a £95,000 fee, taking Nevin south later this year. And just a wee quick recap of Pat Nevin's career. So Chelsea, 1983 to 88, he played 193 league games, scoring 36 goals. He moved to Everton between 88 and 92, playing 109 games there. He then moved to Tranmere, he was there for 5 seasons. He moved to Kilmarnock for a season, and then between 98 and 2000 he was at Motherwell, and he has 28 Scottish caps, and he also won the second division with Clyde in 1981-82 and second division champions with Chelsea 83-84, so in his first season down there.
Scotland Youth, don't forget Scotland Youth, the under 20,
the World Cup. Yeah, absolutely.
I did actually the following year. Pat Nevin was one of the sort of first shoot interviews I did. Interviewed him in Glasgow when he came back for the summertime one time, and kind of got on with him after that, and just for always kind of kept in touch. And years later, he gave me his Scotland talk when he kind of the one from Euro '96 with basically the sort of tartany one.
Yeah.
And he kind of gave me that. It was basically back in the days before you put it was just numbered, a big Umbro, a yellow sort of number 7 on the back. There's no names on it, whatever. Then, and I used to wear it for 5 because it was a long sleeve one. I used to wear it for 5 sides in the winter time, kind of thing. But it was a couple of years ago. I sent it back to him because I was looking through and I thought, this is daft. And his boy at this stage would probably be 23 or 4, whatever, and was going to football. And I thought, really, you're better at these things. I knew he hadn't kept these tops.
Right.
And I basically said no. And he basically, so I sent it back in the post to him so he could give it to his son, because you don't realise, and you think, and I know a lot of players give away tops and everything and don't think twice about it, but it's possibly only once you get kids of yourself and then you go, all right, actually, and then the kids, they're the ones that actually make a big connection for whatever. So Chelsea was he was a big hero at Chelsea.
Right.
He went there at the right period. He was a Scottish entertainer, at a club that was badly needing some entertainment.
Yeah. That's a great gesture, sending that back. What was the previous story, Tom? There was somebody else playing.
Andy Boland was on, and he was telling the story that George McCluskey got Johan Cruyff's shirt when Celtic played Ajax, but George McCluskey's brother used to wear it to 5 sides, and it got nicked at the changing room.
Well, can I actually make it worse than that then? Because I'll tell you, I wrote this one a couple of years ago, and you'll be horrified, even though you're way too young to even get the significance of it. Alan McInally, I did a piece with Alan when his dad, Jackie, it was about, so I think this would probably be 2015 or 16, because it was the 50th anniversary of Kilmarnock facing or drawing with Real Madrid in the European Cup. They got a 2-2 draw at Rugby Park, and so Alan McInally's dad, Jackie, he played for the Kilmarnock and scored, I think, in the game. And so basically, I was wanting to do the piece, but Alan kind of made me aware that his dad was kind of already having sort of signs of dementia. So I just did the interview with Alan, but it turned out to be a better interview in a way, because the great story was that Alan said that his dad later on, after the game, swapped tops with the Real number 7, who we think was Hento, and basically brought the top home and whatever. And years later on, as only stupid boys will do, the 12-year-old Alan McInally, or possibly 11-year-old, is wanting to go to training at Ayr United Boys Club on a really wet winter's night. And instead of just picking out the worst shit he could find, he went into the drawer, picked out his dad's Real Madrid, Hento, whatever. And I think he said his dad cracked up eventually. He found it in a washing machine, going around, and ripped to shreds. So there you go. That's it. And that's just that one person's precious item. It's not, as 12-year-olds never look at people's stuff as being precious.
That's true. That's a horrible thought, that.
No, I know.
Yeah. Okay, moving on from that section, we're going to go to page 10. Okay, and this is a full-page colour photo of Watford's John Barnes in action against Everton's full-back Brian Burrows. So we talked about kits. Again, it's there's something about Watford colours that I just love. I love the combinations of the red, the black, and the yellow. There's something about them. So
very Partick Thistle as well.
Yeah.
In the 70s, they had that.
You've just ruined it for me by saying that. Just yeah. But again, another great photo. Is it Asics boots? I think.
The boots really stand out.
Yeah. Just what you were talking about earlier on, Phil, about how they try and make the photographs so that you can see all these different things.
Yeah.
And they are very
well. I mean, that's the first time I remember something as different as Asics, because obviously they'll, so whether, for example, an agent has gone to John Barnes and said, we're them because they are different, and you'll get them seen. And at that stage, obviously, John was not the big star he was at Liverpool, so rather than that's quite a good guy to get your boots on, because he certainly made he was quite quickly in the England team after, and then Liverpool, obviously. So yeah, bit of a, that is a great, but it is the crispness of the picture as well, and that's why I think years later, when advertising things come in across the front, your tops are getting sort of get adulterated a wee bit with the whatever thing you've got across the front.
Yeah, it's almost like a bit of a watercolour, isn't it? The style to it. It's really good. Moving across the page, we have an advert to look at, and this is for electronic pocket games, and they're only £6.99 each, and it says in brackets plus 3 wrappers from Everready Power Plus batteries. And the games shown are Ape Attack, Flying Flapjack, Slip and Slide, and Jailbreak. The games are from Innovator Electronics and are a handheld electronic device with a small screen in the middle. There are buttons on either side of the front that appear to allow you to control the movement of the game. 3 of the 4 games look to have the same sort of design of buttons that allow left and right movement, while there is one that has left, right, up and down as well. They sort of look familiar to me, but I don't remember having them. But they look quite basic, even though they've got an actual screen with, computerized movement and stuff on them. I don't know, either of you two remember these things?
Not at all. I'm too old for that. Subbuteo was my game.
Yeah.
I was a Subbuteo on this. If you can get your Subbuteo thing down on the carpet. In fact, I never knew anybody who ever played Subbuteo on a table. So it was only our carpets, and obviously people used to come in the room and walk all over your part.
Did you have an underlay that you put it on, so a blanket, and then and would you iron it as well, or would you just go for the full authentic?
Went on a carpet, and ironing was definitely, that seems to be a wee bit further down the line from me. I don't think I realised that was a possibility.
Yeah. It's made so much difference. But we're talking earlier on about the 70s and 60s and 70s pitches all being cut up. So I guess that was the authentic look and feel of the unironed pitch was back. That was to do that. So Tom, does this ring a bell at all?
Yeah, vaguely. I didn't have one, but I think someone I knew had one. So I think I might have had a shot of one once. But yeah, that's about it. I couldn't tell you which one. No.
Would they have taken those batteries? I have this idea that they would take watch batteries rather than these. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe right.
Yeah. Okay, moving along to page 12. We're looking at Teenage Titans. So this page is 4 black and white photos of stars of the future and include Stuart Robson of Arsenal, who's been tipped as a future club captain, Norman Whiteside of Man United, who came to prominence during the World Cup finals with Northern Ireland, Mark Walters, who's shown celebrating a goal in the FA Cup for Aston Villa. The accompanying text says that he's putting pressure on Peter With and Gary Shaw at the club. And lastly, we have Paul McStay of Celtic, who's mentioned as a future King of Parkhead, while at the time everyone else is looking at Charlie Nicholas at the moment. So Paul McStay, do you want to wax lyrical about Paul?
Well, I was kind of obviously. The other guys are all very. Norman Whiteside already been to a World Cup. Talk about, how early he broke through, and nobody kind of ever really gives him credit for that. But Paul, I was kind of fortunate to see as a reserve sort of youth player. I had a friend who was in the sort of Celtic. He was a friend with David Moyes, so that one of the reasons that I used to go and watch the reserves at Celtic that time was David and my friend who was called David Kenny. Basically were playing most of the reserve games. So Paul was coming through, and even before he was kind of I certainly remember going to a lot of youth games in '81, and certainly Paul was already in a very good youth team. In fact, sort of Charlie Nicholas had already made it out into the first team a year before, and the other ones were kind of really sort of bubbling to the surface kind of quite well. But you watch Paul stay doing what he did, and I suppose it is a bit like Norman Whiteside. People thought, all right, 17. I think maybe the difference with Norman Whiteside was he looked older than 17 playing in the World Cup. When Paul was 17, he did obviously kind of looked almost the way he is just now. Is very kind of sort of slight, but an incredible passer of the ball. And I was sort of fortunate to be. Sometimes you're kind of dead lucky with the games you go to. You would never think that the kind of crappy sort of first round cup tie or whatever is all going to be anything that people would look back on. But Paul, his debut was against Queen of the South in the sort of 1982 third round of the Scottish Cup, home. One of those sort of old-fashioned days you used to get when they sort of used to have the park was all frozen, but they had sort of hay around it and everything. I remember that kind of thing. And basically, he never looked back, and he was one of those players, certainly like Whiteside, that once he's in, he wasn't ever going to get him out. And I remember he scored a stunning goal for Scotland not that long afterwards in the World Cup qualifiers
against Iceland.
Iceland. Mm-hmm. And essentially that was it. There wasn't any way that he was going to, and that's good in a way, because we all hate to see, we were talking about earlier on, somebody's sort of high point being at 17, and the boy that went from Inverness to Liverpool. Simply, it's good as football fans that you get a chance to see a talent, and a talent basically stay, at the club that you follow, and especially for Scotland fans, he gave such a lot to Scotland as well that, I think it's kind of almost impossible to believe, would ever happen now, because obviously everybody says, well, that's it. Why would you stay with your club, or why would you stay to play football in Scotland? So I think that's always the great problem we have. I think it's a bit when I'm looking at the other pictures of Arsenal or Man United, possibly a bit easier for them to convince, or it's harder for the likes of Harry Kane, for example, to say right, well, that's it. I'm leaving Spurs because he plays in the sort of richest league in the world. But yeah, when you're in Scotland, it's a tougher ask.
I think Kieran Tierney is probably an example of that. He would have been, very similar to Paul McStay, a Celtic man brought up. All the fans loved him, the quality was there, and probably Celtic fans would look at him and think along the same lines of Paul McStay. He'll stay with us. He loves the club. Blah blah blah. But it's amazing the draw from down south. And you think if that was here, if Paul McStay was playing in the current game, or would they have maybe been a wee bit more inclined to move? Because at the end of the day, it's money, isn't it? It's money, and it's about playing. Well,
I think probably the greatest problem is I have known Paul, and I certainly, one of those things that I know he kind of got a great kick out of, when Scotland got to the Euro 92 and everything, and he did well in that. It was one of those things, and that was about the same season Inter Milan wanted him to kind of come, but I think maybe Paul had a look, if we were talking about Ian Rush earlier on, maybe the likes of Ian Rush having not gone there and enjoyed Italy that much, even though it was a different decade. The likes of Dennis Law and Joe Baker had all left Scotland to go to Italy years ago, and obviously not, and Jimmy Rees as well, and obviously not stayed very long, but Paul was maybe actually possibly he's a different type of person, and maybe he was one of the guys that sort of realised that what he was getting in terms of his sort of personal life at home. He wasn't getting, whereas if you went to Italy, I'm pretty sure you were, you had good bits of it, and maybe the attention from the media, etc., was more intrusive than compared to here at the time.
I'm guessing he wouldn't have had the same sort of pressure like from agents and stuff that they would have nowadays. Any sort of pressure back then probably would have been from family members and friends, and they probably would have encouraged them, look, life's great here as you are, so why move? So maybe that's got a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, like you said, it is well, the money, the wage gap wouldn't have been as wide. I mean, you would be getting, I don't know, £500 a week playing for Celtic, and maybe 700 playing for Man United or something in those days. And then you'd maybe get different house prices or whatever, and so the money's maybe the biggest thing. But nowadays, obviously, the wage gap between Scotland and England is just so massive that you see guys leaving, Scotland to go and play in the League Two in England,
or worse.
Yeah.
Adam Rooney, who I thought was
Salford,
a great striker for Aberdeen, and it was Salford who were able to get him. But, if you know that some of the money that's on offer, even at the lower levels in England, it kind of you sort of you shake your head at what's being offered. So that's why I kind of always admire players who sort of either stay here and get a longer career. Maybe they're thinking about going into coaching or something, and maybe it's not all about moving and getting some cash. Obviously, I think that the differential between Scotland and England, it was the early 90s when it started to sort of it got together, it kind of moved together for a wee bit, but I think it's certainly once the early 2000s kicked in, it was going away in different directions again.
Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is another man who's spent his entire career at Celtic, and it's Tartan Talk with Celtic's Pat Bonner. Now, Paddy Bonner talks about his coming to Celtic and establishing himself in the first team over a season after knocking Peter Latchford from the number 1 spot. While he was wanted by Leicester City and Spurs, he has no regrets about joining Celtic in 1977. He's just been picked as part of the Era squad and is hopeful of removing Jim McDonough from the number 1 spot there, as he has Latchford at Celtic. He singles out some of the Scottish players that have impressed him, including Dundee United's Paul Sturrock, Aberdeen's Mark McGee and Celtic's own Charlie Nicholas, who he raves about, saying, "The boy is totally gifted and one of the few players around who's worthy of every word of praise written in his honour." I mean, that's some praise that from Paddy there, isn't it? So Paddy Bonner, born 1960. Basically, as I say, 641 league appearances for Celtic between 78 and 1998. Absolutely great servant for the club. Won Scottish League 11 cap as well in 1990. That was the centenary, was it? The for that one. And Republic of Ireland, 80 caps. So yeah, Paddy Bonner, bit of a legend as well at Celtic, isn't he?
Yeah, he was. I essentially was kind of fortunate seeing his debut as well. I actually remember back in the day. I don't know. Do you remember the Dryborough Cup? That was again just became probably before you guys started going to football, but sort of late through the 70s, the Dryborough Cup was all kind of one of those pre-season competitions that basically filled in for the absence sort of friendly games and everything. It wouldn't get allowed now because they're too busy playing European qualifiers in July. So it was usually in July, and usually it was won by Aberdeen and Hibs, teams like that used to. But I remember Pat Bonner's debut, and Latchford had been injured just a day before or something in training. So Celtic played Ayr United, and I think it was only a Dryborough Cup semi-final. So they lost it to Ayr. So that wasn't a kind of a very sort of auspicious start, but obviously, he went on to kind of and do really well for a Celtic goalkeeper, because essentially Celtic hadn't really produced many, kind of like in contrast to how good the team was going forward. Celtic weren't really known for great goalkeepers then. Ronnie Simpson was definitely the best one for quite a while, and then maybe you're talking in the 70s, maybe one or two. But so Pat Bonner would definitely be the one that extended his career time. And I think at the time, also because he was just happened to be that you say mentioning replacing Jim McDonough for the Republic of Ireland, because again, Republic of Ireland didn't have a huge goalkeeping tradition, so he was kind of like the guy who's sort of the perfect person to fill the one. And obviously they had I don't know if you saw the documentary recently about Jack Charlton and the Republic of Ireland. So obviously the big story and one of the thing about Jack's sort of the 1990 World Cup was Pat Bonner's penalty save in Genoa. Which I remember watching on TV, because I was saying this to my wife recently. It was we'd gone to watch Scotland World Cup, and gone for 2 weeks to watch them as fans, and we had 2 games in Genoa, which was a great stadium. It was the very first sort of time the stadium had just been opened, and the Scots fans we got beat by Costa Rica, and then the following Wednesday, it was a great game against Sweden. But it was kind of interesting. We were watching the Pat Bonner make the penalty save, and I said to my wife, that's where you were, behind those goals. We were there with Scotland fans a week before, and then you have to come back, and as all Scotland fans usually do, they have to come back and watch it on the rest of the tournament on TV.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Bonner for me was pretty much the main Celtic goalkeeper. I sort of remember Peter Latchford a bit, maybe Alan Rough for a little bit. He was in for a little spell, but other than that, it was Paddy Bonner that was pretty much all the way through me growing up. Without a doubt.
Quite like the wee thing, the plug that he's given there to Charlie Nicholas, which sort of a spoiler alert. There's I don't even think there's any Charlie Nicholas stuff in this issue, but having lived in London that year, I was very aware of A, how good Charlie was, but B, and I was coming up to watch a few Celtic games, but I was aware from living in London and buying the newspapers of how the operation to get him down to London had already kicked into gear, to the extent, and clearly, as you say, the wages were a wee bit different, but no, I think it's maybe 3 times or whatever it was. But yeah, and Shoot were one of the ones that were complicit in that, because they famously, and there's a very tacky the sort of photo spread that Charlie Nick did before going to Arsenal, and he's basically the photographer taking him about Glasgow, and Charlie's standing there in his leather trousers. It's raining. I think it was raining in one shot, sun in the other. So it's a perfect Glasgow day. Yeah. Basically, he's kind of photographed outside Hampden. I assume he wasn't allowed to be photographed outside Celtic Park because they didn't want to give the game away that there he was. But I think, and when I see it with the hindsight, I go, right, so you had gone, obviously, you were away even before that sort of, I suppose the agent had obviously decided, right, you know what, get yourself in shoot and get yourself on that, the leather trousers, which were obviously...
Yeah, it was a double-page centre spread as well, that. Had him cooking up beans in his mum's house and things like that as well.
I remember, that's it.
He's laying across a park bench or something. Yeah, it's all ingrained in my head.
Charlie's a very nice guy. He's one of those guys that I've been kind of lucky enough to do sort of interviews with then. But the famous thing was that just about then, I think that June or whatever, we would play England at Wembley, and it would be a midweek game. And obviously Charlie was scoring goals left, right, and centre, and obviously I think he was basically down to play in the game. And I think there was some sort of official photo of the team being taken in their suits or whatever, and Charlie wasn't there to be as part of that photo. And Jock Stein, being Jock Stein, with a sort of typical West of Scotland humour that maybe is lost with time, he turned around and obviously maybe being slagging off Charlie about wearing leather trousers. But Jock Stein turned around to the media and said that Charlie won't be at the photo shoot. He's gone to the cobblers to get his trousers fixed.
Brilliant. Okay, listen, we'll move on. Let's see what we're going to look at next. So just going to have a quick look at these. These are a couple of adverts, and we've got the Aston Villa team shop, and we've also got the Celtic shop there as well, where you can send an SAE, which is a self-addressed envelope for the younger listeners at home, which basically means that you put an envelope with your name and address on it, stick a stamp on it, and stick it inside another envelope and send it away. Different days. But yeah, obviously Aston Villa have just won the European Cup, so they're absolutely making hay while the sun shines there with that. Celtic says the official shop of the Celtic Football Club, Scottish League Cup winners 1982 to 83. So maybe not the greatest of seasons for Celtic to be, other seasons it's like league, Championship winners and Scottish Cup winners, but this one they've just got the Scottish League Cup winners. Okay, so moving on.
Sorry, Andy, I should see if we move back up to page 13. I've mentioned this before, at the bottom of the Pat Bonner.
Right. Okay, Nobby.
Is Nobby. I've mentioned that before, but I remember that particular cartoon.
Yeah.
I like it.
You want to read?
No, do you like it?
Well, it was just one that stuck in my mind. Andy's not particularly a fan of the cartoons.
I tried to get a laugh at it again, and no.
That's one I particularly remember. So just for the benefit of people listening, it's Nobby sitting in the dressing room, and he says, Bobby Robson's watching us today, but I've been suspended and can't play. And his gaffer says, don't worry, Bobby Robson knows about that. And Nobby excitedly says, what, he knows I've been suspended? And his gaffer says, no, he knows you can't play.
That is a good one. Actually, when I did read it, I thought that was a good one, but I couldn't let it on for obvious reasons. I've got an image to uphold.
Keep up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Okay, Nobby. Right. I'll give you that one. Right. Back to page 14, 15. Back to page 15. So we're up front with Steve Archibald. Steve says, one of the most frightening experiences of my career was playing in goal at Hampden Park. I was standing keeper during my young days at Clyde and was told to pull on the green jersey when a regular goalie broke an ankle in the first half of a league match there. Queen's Park scored within a few minutes and Steve feared the worst, but he saved the next shot that came his way and they eventually won 5-2. It was an experience that made him realise why keepers have to be big, brave and slightly mad, as he remembers the fear he had in dealing with corner kicks and the rough, tough forwards that came with it. He mentions both Glenn Hoddle and Graham Roberts as standing keepers at Spurs, singling out Glenn Hoddle as one that could have actually made it as a first-class keeper. He also recalls Bobby Clark at Aberdeen, who told him, "The moment outfield players start to tell a keeper where to stand, you are in trouble." He says that Bobby was boss in the box. You didn't argue with him. He also mentions Alan Rough, who's currently playing at Hibs, and talks about the criticism that he's received, particularly from the English press. Steve says, "Alan is one of the finest all-round keepers I've seen. He has brilliant reflexes." Now, Steve also asks why Scottish keepers come in for so much stick when they appear to make more mistakes than their English counterparts. His belief is that the Scottish game is more positive. Teams attack more and get the ball into the penalty areas quicker. Because Scottish keepers are more involved and have to deal with more than in England, they're going to concede more goals. It's an interesting take on that, isn't it? That our game's better, so our goalkeepers are rubbisher.
Our game is better. I think it was quite interesting though. He had, obviously, Steve had just crossed the border a year or two before, and gone from a very good Aberdeen team was in the Scotland team at that stage. So he was able to kind of offer, if somebody had just gone without any sort of CV and made it a case for Scottish goalkeepers, they'd probably get shot down. But Steve obviously was one of these, and he was quite forthright as well.
Yeah.
Ironically, I was kind of obviously going to kind of let you know that one of the reasons why Steve got his gig in doing the thing and shoot in terms of his piece was obviously Steve. One of the people who used to, before I did, one of the people who did the sort of Scottish stuff for shoot was a Glasgow journalist called Alec Gordon, who's no relation to me. He's older than me, but he used to actually be a former sort of sports editor at the Sunday Mail. And that mentored me and a couple of other people. But one of Alec's things was doing the shoot stuff before myself and other people came on. But he knew Steve, and that was one of the reasons why he was able to kind of, I assume, help Steve get the leg up to get the. Because I'm not saying it's easy to do, but the idea that you would kind of cross the border and be a guy from Aberdeen, and end up getting a column in a magazine, national magazine, is kind of, he's doing well. So it's always, I'm assuming, and Steve is always kind of quite forthright and sort of blunt with his opinions. So I think some people kind of quite like that.
Yeah.
And he was going at the right. I mean, Steve Archibald's ascent was really big. To go from Spurs to Barcelona and play in Champions League finals, etc., was that showed he was a very good striker.
He's definitely a quality player, and yeah, absolutely. He certainly comes across as someone who's quite forthright and doesn't mind giving you his opinion. He doesn't really sugarcoat things when he doesn't want them to be, which I really like that. Okay, let's have a wee move on. I've just lost my place. This will get edited out beautifully. Give me a second. There we go. So just moving on to a couple of pages. So we're at Ferguson rocks England star chasers. So Alex Ferguson, boss at Aberdeen, has knocked back bids for Doug Rugby and Andy Watson from teams in England. These decisions may have been questioned at the time, as Rugby wasn't a first team regular and Watson was in the reserves. However, it looks like the Aberdeen boss has made yet another shrewd piece of judgment. On Rugby, Fergie says, "Big Doug has his critics, but I'm not one of them. The lad is over 6 foot and weighs more than 14 stone, but I've never seen him intentionally hurt anyone. That's not his style. He goes out to win, but he's as clean as they come. The dirty stuff doesn't interest him." There has been some suggestion that Rugby could be getting a Scotland call-up, but even he himself isn't looking for that at the moment, although he would go on to win a Scottish cap this year. Andy Watson was catapulted back into the limelight with his display as a sub against Hibs in the Scottish Cup, where they won 4-1 and he scored 2. He says, I enjoyed that match. It was good to get a run in the first team again, and I'm glad I played my part. There's no one at Pittodrie who can expect to walk into the first team and just stay there. The article also mentions young striker John Hewitt in the race for first team places. Now, as a spoiler, Doug Rugby signed for Chelsea in 1984 for 150,000 and played for Brighton, Shrewsbury, Fulham, Dunfermline and Montrose. Andy Watson moved to Leeds this year for 60,000. He returned to Scotland a year later with Hearts and was there between 84 and 87 before finishing up at Hibs between 87 and 89. He retired from playing aged just 29 through injury. So a couple of players there, sort of on the fringe, but I love that. The Aberdeen boss has made yet another shrewd piece of judgment as he would go on to do throughout the rest of his career. He knew when a player was needed, didn't he?
Yeah, I think the great thing about him was that I think you can't be a manager if you've only ever been at one level of the game. I don't think you could just play elite and manage elite. And equally, I don't think if you want to be a manager, if Fergie had his sort of slow progress as a player, and even when he got to Rangers and it didn't work for him, he went back down the way a wee bit, and then kind of gradually built up his kind of early sort of coaching sort of credits. And so when he get into Aberdeen, though, I mean, this was the great season for them. The Cup Winners' Cup final, beat Real Madrid, and it was a team, and beat Bayern Munich to get there as well. And Doug Rugby's in the team, and I'm pretty sure Andy Watson probably was as well. And all those guys, at that time when I used to kind of, particularly when I would go to that season, we'd go to games in London as well. I'd go and watch Spurs, for example, who were getting I think a year down the line, Spurs would win the UEFA Cup in '84. And the Spurs team that I would see was nowhere. I'm bearing in mind, I'm coming back up the road every occasional time to see Aberdeen, and the Spurs team for me wasn't as good as the Aberdeen team. And I think the Aberdeen team, just nobody down south really gave it the credit. And obviously, once it really hit top success, Gordon Strachan was moving to Man United, and Mark McGee was moving to Germany, and you had other players who were moving over in a couple of years. So, but the good thing was that Fergie had doing what he does brilliantly. Was he's never, and I think he took this to Man United as well. He kind of never ever stopped looking about to see where the next sort of line in the sort of players, the conveyor belt would be.
Yeah.
And certainly at Aberdeen, he had identified he was quite good at picking up players from St Mirren. St Mirren, an excellent team, 81, 82, and he took quite a few. Billy Stark, 83, I think he took him up, and he'd obviously taken sort of the likes of Peter Weir, and and then he was getting his own younger Aberdeen players to kind of come through as well. So that's essentially the template that he got from Man United. Eventually, get the younger guys through the sort of gigs generation, but prior to that, you would probably pick a few sort of established stars particularly from Scotland. A guy called Brian McClare, I think, might be one of them. The idea was that I think some managers might have misjudged Scotland when they got to England. I think Fergie kind of knew that there were definitely players that you would be better taking players from there than elsewhere because they were really decent professionals.
Yeah, I think what he was so good at was rebuilding teams or refreshing teams.
Yeah.
And just not letting them go stale, making sure that there was always somebody coming through. And I think that was most shown when he left. And other managers just couldn't do it with the squads that were there. And yeah. Let's have a wee look at the next one. So we're into the middle pages, and we have the Derby County team photo. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. It's a Patrick kit with Patrick splashed right across the jersey. We've got a Ram badge in the middle above the sponsor logo. It's a white shirt, blue shorts, and white socks. And it's a pretty much it's not a shirt that really jumps out to me, and I don't think it's a great one.
No, it's not a good one. I think Derby was always one of those teams that it's not that they've never really had that. This kind of always been their colours. It's usually been white and sort of navy, but that's kind of hard to do anything with, really, if you're wedded to that. I'm not sure Patrick were my kind of. They would have been the one I'd have been choosing for my kit, but that's just a preference thing. But yeah, I bet you can see, even having looked at a few of the guys, it just doesn't. When we were talking about the Liverpool kit on the front, or the John Barnes picture for the Waterford one, this just doesn't do any kind of. It doesn't shout anything.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, it does look as though it might be pretty cold. There's a few faces that say that. Plus, we've got Peter Taylor there with the Mac on.
Well, yeah. Well, is that not? Can you actually? I don't want to say too many things that's rude, but that's the sort of that Mac is a very kind of a cry for help. It's you could be getting it. Is that not a sort of lineup for Crime Watch or something? For guys with Mac?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts and probably is a bit it's a bit better than what you're sort of alluding to, but I'm sort of thinking Inspector Gadget. That's about as nice thing as I can say about that look. But yeah, it looks as though it's maybe trying to do a bit of what the Umbro kits are doing, but just not doing it at all.
I think when you look at it as well, most team groups are usually shot at the summer or the first sort of month of the season, and they're kind of quite good these days at making sure everything's sort of sorted out for whatever time in advance. That looks as if it's been taken in the winter time.
Yeah.
Hence the coat, maybe so, and the grass doesn't look quite as green as it should do. So quite why you'd be doing a kit. Yeah, I'm looking at a boy in the back row there at the left hand side. I don't know who he is. Boy with blonde hair. He's freezing.
Yeah. So just picking out a few. I mean, we've got Peter Taylor, who we've spoke about. We've got Roy McFarland, and he actually still played 8 games for County this year. He was originally at County between 67 and 81. He played 434 league games before a spell at Bradford City, so we've got him there. Mike Brawley, who's in there, was born in Kilmarnock, 1954, and was a winger. So he was at Chelsea, Bristol City, Grimsby Town, where he played most of his games, Derby County, and then finished at Scunthorpe. We've obviously at the front, we've got Archie Gemmell, and this is his second spell at County. He played between 70 and 77, and then 80 and 82. And they would finish mid-table this season in the second division. I think that sort of just the photograph sums up what their season must have been like, just mid-table mediocrity.
I think it's unusual. They've got the chief scout in the picture as well.
Well, that might be. Yeah, I'm not too sure. Even the great thing about looking at over the last couple of years is there's been a lot of really bad stories coming out of football, and you do wonder. Who got into what pictures? But yeah, chief scouts. I'm not. I don't think it's a good. It's a good thing to have.
Yeah, although to be honest with him, he probably he looks the gear he's wearing probably is the best of the lot. It looks exactly the best fitting. So it's just unfortunate he's got his eyes closed as well. So
put it this way, that's it. I mean. For Scotland fans who love Archie Gemmell, that's not the look that we remember. That's for sure. That's Scotland kit. That's Argentina '78. That would be sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
He certainly had a very. Taking a wee break.
Okay, so we're going to move out of the magazine for a minute here, or a few minutes, and we're going to do our focus on Phil Gordon. So we're going to turn the tables on it yourself and throw some questions at you. So just give us some answers. Okay. Full name?
Philip James Gordon.
What was your birthplace?
Glasgow.
What was your first car?
Well, this actually is almost like footballers' territory. Usually, I would sort of feel quite badly on this, but didn't get a first car till I was 26, so you kind of got to bear that in mind. It was actually an XR2i,
Okay.
for the time. So I kind of have to qualify by saying I just moved down to Darlington. I was working down there, and the newspaper that I was working for, the Northern Echo, gave me money to get a car, and basically that was they were putting money towards it. So if it was up to me, it'd been a Fiat Panda to save some cash. But my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Louise, said, no, listen, get something nice. She said XR2i. So if I wrote down XR2i, that looks like a total footballer's sort of car from the 1980s.
The only way it could be worse if you said it was red.
No, white.
Right, okay, yes. That saves it a little bit.
That's
Who's your favourite player of all time?
Favourite player of all time would be Bobby Lennox.
Oh, good shout. Favourite team?
Favourite team is Celtic.
Okay. What's your most memorable match?
As a Scotland fan, as a Celtic fan, because I'm old enough, I was European Cup final in '67. I was watching it on telly as a 7-year-old, so able to see that. As a Scotland fan, it was beating the Czechs in 1973 at Hampden to qualify for the World Cup for like the first time in 16 years, which was epic. Yeah. And it's still a game that is impossible to kind of replicate to anybody, the noise, unless you'd actually kind of experienced it. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you remember about the European Cup final from the time, or do you just remember bits and pieces and everything's about playing back, or do you actually remember much of it from it?
I'm fortunate enough to remember, the stuff is obviously, I think, you're like yourself, we talk everything up with a wee bit of sort of video memory and that kind of thing, and even now if I'm doing an interview with somebody, somebody that played in the 60s or 70s, or I quite often will look at the game online before I sort of refresh my own memory. But the 67 one was simple enough because I always remember we got a day off school, which was great, and at primary school, so we're kind of like, you couldn't get any better for that. And I just kind of like remember coming up the road at like 4:45 and getting in and sitting and watching it. And kind of the great thing was that my dad had just sort of taken me to games about like 6 months before that. So I was already going to football, and he was kind of taking me there. And you were basically, I suppose we all think every age is a great age, but seven's always you are very kind of aware that's your first sort of the things we kind of remember and things kind of quite well, and it's so from that point of view, and then obviously once maybe 20 years later, I think you got the sort of first videos kind of come out and that kind of thing, and certainly in 2017 when they had a kind of the 50th celebration, there were quite a few newspapers that the Times did a lot of sort of remembering Lisbon. So the good thing was I went back and I did an interview with Bobby Lennox, who if I got a double hit with Bobby, I was able to do him for his goal against England in the 3-2 win in '67, and then the one in Lisbon a couple of weeks later.
Okay, next question is, what's been your biggest thrill?
Biggest thrill? Cliched one, that with the birth of both my kids, Callum and Rachel. So. Okay,
no problem. What's been your biggest disappointment?
Callum and Rachel. No, that's a joke. Biggest disappointment, football disappointment would be Scotland losing Argentina 78. Yeah, it's thankfully you're both too young to even to go on board. I know Andy's, well, you
Well-
might have remembered it slightly. It was just the whole, but it was really hard to kind of get into that mindset where we had a good team, and as we proved when we got there and beat Holland, we were good enough to go against the best, but we went with such high hopes, and there was such amount of hype. And hype's maybe a wrong word, but I think that I think the hype reflected the whole public kind of how we felt at the time, and we felt good about ourselves. And the worst thing about getting knocked out was how bad we obviously felt about ourselves. So I actually think the country took a long while to sort of recover from it.
Yeah. The thing, the '78 World Cup was the first tournament I remember. Not in great detail, but I remember certain moments of it, and I remember some of the Scotland. I remember the dejection of the games, getting beat, and then Archie's goal, and then that 40-yarder that killed us off, or made it 3-2, and that just killed us off. So I do remember that was probably, if I have to think back, what was my first footballing memory, it probably would have been that World Cup that stuck with me more than anything. But just like yourself saying earlier on, you do top up a lot of your memories later on in life as well. One of the things I always say is, like, it's amazing how many memories that you have an associated photograph with them as well.
Yeah, well, Archie Gemmill, that's if one is, and he looked a bit like the Bee Gees at the time, the beard, but he was basically summer of '78. I'm pretty sure it was the summer when the Bee Gees were out with Night Fevers. So Archie had an iconic look, and that, I suppose, nobody ever wanted to see the Bee Gees at 4 a.m. a scruffy shadow or in a Derby County kit. And I don't think anybody it's Archie Gemmill Scotland kit 1978 World Cup. So that was his, and it looks great. I've seen the goal quite a few times recently. It's still great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. What's the best country you've visited?
On holiday, I would say Italy, in terms of the mix of having a beach and the places to go on tour. I was dead lucky that we went there for the World Cup, that it threw everything in, because you had, you can a beach holiday, go to football, great restaurants.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Italy's one of my favourites. Favourite food?
Pasta.
Yeah. I'm with you in that, don't worry. Miscellaneous likes, so give me two things that you like doing.
Likes? I was just going to be... I used to play golf all the time, but that'd be a few years ago. But likes would just be, going out walking, fresh air.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On the flip side, miscellaneous dislikes, so give me two things that drive you up the wall. Just the two.
I don't like fakes and frauds, people who are in any walk of life. I like honesty. So yeah, they'd be my dislikes.
Right, okay. Favourite TV show?
This is quite easy. Frasier. It's a comedy from sort of 1990s, set in Seattle.
Yep.
And basically, it kind of like evolved into one of the smartest comedies in America, but it produced a lot of kind of good sort of people kind of going on and acting on it. It was always one of those things that people were desperate to go and appear on.
Are you looking forward to the reboot?
No. Honestly, I'm worried that it could flop badly, just because it's one of those things that in my mind, it was one of those things that was left. It's a bit like Perfect Gigs, or, people acting. Or footballers, there's a time where you go, right, that's it, you've hit that perfect time, disappear.
Muhammad Ali coming back to fight again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, like when Henry Larsson left Celtic, he got it judged perfectly right, because he was right. If he'd stayed on 2 or 3 years more longer, he might have not done what he did. Whereas he goes to Barcelona, moves up a level, does what he has to do for himself, and everyone thinks of him in the best. My worry about Frasier is that well, I think it's really funny, and I think audiences of a certain age find it really funny. It might not connect with younger people now,
No, yeah.
and that's the great thing about it.
Well, coincidentally, one of my favourite TV shows is related to Frasier, so it was Cheers.
Cheers. Well,
It's
that's
just-
why mine came. I
Yeah.
think we all watched Cheers eventually, or originally. That was the whole.
Hmm.
And that was the ironic thing. I think it's it's maybe like football teams. If you were looking at Cheers, you'd never have picked out Frasier as the guy who was going to break.
Hmm.
He's going to be the next star.
Yeah.
You'd have thought maybe Norm or whatever, or had Norm and Cliff or whatever. But yeah,
The thing is,
So
they could have all had spin-offs, couldn't they? They could have. There was enough about their characters that they could have had successful spin-offs.
It was.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Cliff in the post office and stuff like that. Although, to be fair, it's not as if they spent any time in their other lives anyway. They were always in the bar.
All these jobs, and I also quite like the fact that Sam Malone was a sort of alcoholic, and basically the only reason he was in the bar was to keep himself off the drink. If you notice, he was always drinking water.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and he played very cleverly. And again, that was always one of the things when they did Frasier, and there was a crossover. And Sam Malone, definitely one of those that Sam comes to Seattle was one of the ones. And I think that was his memorable line where he turns up and he says to Frasier, "What you here for?" And Sam says, "I'm here to do a coach for the Seahawks." And all right, very good. And then obviously his dad knows baseball and goes, "Listen, Sam, nobody wants to work for the Seahawks. They're really bad." So that's why they were a sort of standing joke at that time. But yeah, I suppose the good thing about what I like about Cheers was that it had sport involved in it as well. It was one of those things that every now and again it dipped into the baseball or the ice hockey for Carla's coaching her husband.
I think I'm just going to have to go start watching Cheers and Frasier again, aren't I? So there we go. There's my TV sorted out for the next God knows how many months. Next question: favourite singers? So I'll give you two. You can pick two singers.
Two singers? That's more than I thought I was going to get. Wow. See, the favourite band, Simple Minds.
Yep.
Favourite singer now is James Grant, who's used to be in like Love and Money, but he's basically a younger a guy in his 50s, and he does his own stuff. He's from Glasgow, and he's one of those guys that I've probably seen live over the last 10 years or so. Maybe he's seen, I don't know, 20 or 30 times.
Right.
So in all sort of manner of gigs, whether it's wee places or sort of Paisley Abbey. I remember that was one of the ones. And so I think that's the great thing. Everyone was kind of desperate to get back to gigs, and that's certainly one of mine. But yeah, Simple Minds have always been the band that I've kind of gone to see. So kind of quite lucky they're still around.
Okay. Next one, favourite actors. So you can have two again. I'm feeling generous.
Oh, I struggle for actors.
Sorry, one actor.
Actor. There you go. Well, let's just go for big Brian Cox from Dundee, because he's I don't know if you saw the thing that he was in on Sky recently, the Succession.
Yeah, brilliant.
And rips the piss out of Scottish football as well with this
storyline
at one stage. I won't give away any spoilers, but it's quite funny.
Yeah. I tweeted it, so I did spoil it, but it was quite a fun, because quite often you could try something like that and it wouldn't work, but it worked pretty well. So great one. Best friend. Who's your best friend?
Best friend, plural, would be I've got two people I've fortunately known for a long while. So Jeff Fitzpatrick, I've known since I was at uni, and Stephen Kennedy, who were the two people I would kind of go to in terms of like still see a lot. So fortunate.
Okay. Who's been the biggest influence on you?
My mum and my dad. That's that cliche,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously, yeah, for what they both gave me. They were both English teachers, so they were kind of not just giving me the nuts and the bolts of helping me to kind of maybe do the job I do, but they were there in terms of all that sort of give you the things that you needed to grow up.
Yeah. Okay, final question. Which person in the world would you most like to meet?
I hope I don't upset anybody, but this is a genuine one. It would be Pope Francis, because I had the kind of fortune of in 2013 went to Rome to invited to like a papal mass kind of thing. So that was like the first time I'd seen him, and I think obviously he's a very kind of he's a good socially aware Pope, a big difference comparison to years gone by, and he's a football fan. There's a big San Lorenzo fan from Argentina. In fact, there was a film that was out recently with it's called The Two Popes, and basically he's taken the mickey out of it was him meeting his predecessor who was German, and the guy the German Pope didn't know anything about football at all. He only knew opera because he was a really classical German. And he was sitting watching the World Cup final from whatever it was it 2006 or no the 2010. So basically the two of them are kind of obviously trying to be very polite, whereas Pope Francis was just wanting to be a proper football fan and sit and cheer.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, that's the end of the Focus On. Tom, do you any questions?
I just want to hear a wee bit more about your days on shoot film.
Yeah.
How you got the gig and what it kind of entailed.
I was lucky in terms of this, as I've touched on earlier, the year that I went to London to do my sort of postgrad journalism degree, I just happened to have a number for the shoot editor. And I kind of blagged my way in. I kind of basically phoned him up. Peter Stewart was his name. Nice guy. West Ham fan. I always say people like, what team do you support? And then it kind of goes away and it's filed away so I can stick it next to whatever. So, Tom and Andy, Clydebank fans, Peter Stewart, West Ham fan, and essentially just was lucky. I went to his office and basically he said, well, look, we're trying to see if we can give you a chance to do any things. Have you got any ideas? I gave him a couple of ideas. And I was just kind of fortunate that a few things that I put up to them in the first few things that I did, they wanted to do. And as the years kind of went on and I sort of started to do more, I was basically, it's one of these things that it was like my second job, but the job that I was, if I was still kind of not totally, I was working as a sub-editor at a lot of different papers, and so it took me a while before you kind of got, it's not like now where you kind of, if you've not got it by 32, what's wrong with you? So it took a while to kind of build up the CV and the working, you would spend ages going to games. That's why I used to go to places like Cowboy covering games and various people. So essentially what happened was your two careers are working together, and the shoot one was one of those things that I was able to do wherever else I was working, and I did it at night, and I would do interviews with whatever. So it's kind of fortunate that interviewed quite a few people that I was either at that stage, if they were kind of relatively young, I might have something in common with them. So, like John Collins when he was at Hibs, used to sort of sit and do I remember going through him with his, just as you've done with me, go through the player questionnaire. So he's playing for Hibs, obviously, and your favourite musician, it had to be the Proclaimers. So that I remember, and but the other things kind of in the 90s obviously kind of kicked in. Dave Smith, who became the editor, The Boy Who Died, was a kind of, he was a really nice sort of breath of fresh air. He was dying to give Scottish football as much of a shout as possible. So I certainly remember doing things like for the 1991 Cup final, we did which was Motherwell and Dundee United. We did a fashion shoot thing. All you basically did was, as long as you basically paid the money into the players' pool, you could do what you want. So basically, we had the idea, and because at that time, and Italian fashion was just kind of like breaking out in Glasgow, and so they had an Emporio Armani had just kind of opened up, and at the time I was working at the Evening Times, just around the corner from it, and I just happened to know the guy in there, and I said, "What about the idea of how would you let's get your suits on somebody?" And so I put the idea to the shoot guy, and the idea was that we would basically take one Dundee United player and one Motherwell, and put them in Armani suits and whatever. So it was.
Can I guess who was it? Darren Jackson and Ian Ferguson. Yeah.
You have a very good memory.
Oh, it's another one that's
it's not just Charlie Nicholas you've been looking at. Yeah, I think if I remember rightly, not all the pictures were like, some of them were great Armani ones, but I've got a funny feeling that the photographer, as photographers do, then got some sort of a ridiculous clobber to.
I think there was dungarees involved, maybe.
I think there was dungarees involved as well.
And a ladder, dungarees and a ladder. Yeah, so yeah. I don't know how things like that stick in my mind, but it's crazy, isn't it?
I know, yeah. But I mean, there you go. The idea now that you would, I don't know, do you think you could get 2 players from the cup, guys, come down?
Probably for a good price, but no, you're right. It's things players would do then that they just wouldn't even consider now. So talk to us about the ghostwriting, how that would work for Tartan Talks. So how much would there be involved in the players, or would it be a journalist that did most of it?
I think prior to me coming on, as I say, Alec Gordon definitely did the Tartan Talk, and that was I think that issue that we've just gone through there is Pat Bonner, so probably Alec has done that. I think most of the things will definitely be I think the greatest thing is that once you've got an experienced guy in who does these things, I'm not saying it's ghostwriting because the players are not capable of giving their thoughts, but I think it's just ghostwritten because that's the quickest way to get your thoughts over quickly. And if somebody's done it, then years ago, when I was at the Evening Times, I used to write Ian St John. This is when he was doing sort of St Greavesy. So I did him. He did a column for the Evening Times. So you would talk to him about what was going on in the Scottish game or what he thought. And then you would shape it into some sort of piece. So essentially, that would be, I think, what would happen for Shoot.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff I did was obviously that was me doing my bit, and I would interview a player and then pick out the kind of what I thought was the best bit of it, and I flagged that up to the magazine. Was
it mostly Scottish players that you would interview? Yeah,
almost always. It's just that would be my. I'm trying to remember anything that I would have done. I mean, I did some stuff for World Soccer about in the early 90s, interviewing some foreign players, but I think most of my kind of my stuff was unless, but the only foreign players that I kind of memorably interviewed, obviously, and they were both for Shoot, was one was Istvan Kozma from Dunfermline, and when he was a Hungarian boy that came to Dunfermline in the early 90s, and Jim Leishman he did the interview along with the Istvan. They signed him from Bordeaux, so he kind of only spoke French. So I spoke French, and I basically got Jim Leishman to kind of help out. But that was probably jokingly called his Loch Kelly French. And I do remember interviewing up at St Johnstone Sergei Botacha, just after he'd moved to Perth from Ipswich, and again, Sergei was one of those nice, gentlemanly guys, and you kind of actually, it's one of those things where I think some of them were quite surprised that you were always. I was always very aware when I moved back up and down between Scotland and England a couple of times that you would want to kind of tell people what a nice place you stay in, and having been to Kiev, for example, to work a couple of times, I do know that Scotland's nicer than Kiev. So I always kind of like to see that people who would maybe have an opportunity once they stop playing here would stay here. And I know for a fact that Sergei and his family did that. He stayed in Paisley, and his boy Sergei Jr. had a spell at. In fact, I covered his Scotland under 21 game. I remember doing that. So he ended up being one of those people whose dad played for the USSR in a European final, and then he ended up for Scotland under 21 cap.
Yeah. Okay, we'll jump back into the magazine now. So we're going to move along to page 27, and we've just been speaking about him and your own work, and this is McClair, Terror of the Old Firm. So I'll just read through the article and then we can have a wee chat about it. So Motherwell's Brian McClair has scored 5 goals against the Old Firm in just 12 days. A hat-trick against Rangers was followed by a double against Celtic, and in between, Brian had time to sit an exam as part of his university degree. Very little has gone wrong for Brian since he returned home after a season with Aston Villa, where he went after leaving school, having had regular trials there since he was 14. Brian said, "Villa have more than 40 players, and with only 3 teams, it meant that there was no game every week for some of us, and I was left out regularly. They also hoped to arrange further education for me, but that idea ended when the youth officer left, and Ron Saunders didn't really care about my education. When Villa released me, I took up the option to go to Glasgow Uni." He was snapped up at Motherwell by then manager Ali McLeod shortly after returning, and was straight in amongst the first team. When Davy Hay took over, he found himself in the reserves. Jock Wallace then brought him back in at the beginning of this season, and has returned that faith by scoring 12 goals so far, although he did miss the opening game of the season, as it coincided with a physics exam at uni, which didn't go down too well with Big Jock. So let's talk about this. So what was it? What was it like doing this? Your first the first
Serial
interview for the magazine.
I was fortunate, again, just timing, and essentially the journalism course had 2 placements involved, 2 work placements of 4 weeks. You had to pick a paper, work on it for 4 weeks. So for me, it was a perfect chance to get back to Scotland. So the 2 papers I picked to work on, one was the Evening Times, which I would do it over the Easter time. But for the January 4 weeks, I chose the Sunday Mail, and I was just fortunate enough that I wasn't doing any writing for that paper. What they let you do was shadow their staff. So just happened to be dead lucky. I got sent out, told them I was interested in football, obviously. Got sent out to the game on the Saturday that was referred to in the copy, which was the game at Fir Park. Because I remember Jock Wallace doing a post-match interview at Fir Park, and I went with Don Morrison, who was basically used to be a Sunday Mail writer at the time, and so that was my kind of lucky bit, seeing him do what he's doing, and I kind of went back, flagged up the idea to shoot, and the sort of good thing was that essentially I quickly decided that while I was still in Glasgow for a month, I could get round to interview Brian. As I've still got one of those things where, how do you get in touch with football players? I always used to keep a book, and I always have like the numbers in it, or the first numbers you get. But quite often, before they get old enough to move out, it's their parents' number you usually call up. So I've got, still to this day, like Brian McClair's parents in Airdrie. It's one of those old-fashioned phone numbers, like 26 was Asher Da is basically for 26 used to be was how you would dial Glasgow from to get to Airdrie, and basically phoned him up and arranged to kind of speak to him. As it did help that he was a student, and that maybe made it slightly easier. So I do remember we kind of met at lunchtime at the Glasgow Uni. It's got two unions. One of them is the GUU, and it was just like a coffee bar. He's having his lunch, and that's where we did the interview. It's not very, it's not particularly football or sexy or glamorous or whatever, but equally, who knew that he would go and have like quite a stellar career.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, going to move on a couple of pages to the St Johnstone team group. So we'll have a wee look at this. So there's an article with it, and it talks about star striker John Brogan's woes at the club after a £100,000 transfer to Hibs had fallen through, and he vowed never to play for them again. This was backed up by the fact that he was out playing golf as the club was struggling on the park. Manager Alex Rennie managed to persuade him to stay, and all is rosy once again, with the St Johnstone's main target being promotion. Rennie is hoping to bring back some glory to St Johnstone fans, and even dreams of bringing European football back. Now, as a spoiler, St Johnstone would finish this season as champions of the First Division by a point over Hearts, who would also be promoted. Clydebank would sadly finish in third place, 4 points off of second. So we can take a look at the photo there. It's another Umbro kit, blue shirt with white pinstripes, white V-neck collar, just plain white shorts and blue socks as well. It's a much better kit than the Derby kit for me. George Fleming's looking as if he's he's had a nice wee meal before this.
I've just seen. I can see him above. I like that. Definitely.
So we can. So George Fleming was the coach. We've got Jim Morton in there, who's a legend at St Johnstone. Alex Rennie was a manager down at the bottom left. We've got John Brogan in there as well. And also he was. I covered Hamilton quite a lot, and he had, was a great goal scorer for them. And he's from Hamilton, and he's got a lot of his family are involved in football too. But I saw some footage of the I think the previous season to this. I saw footage a couple of weeks ago of St Johnstone drawing. I think they drew 3 each for Rangers in a cup tie, and I think John Brogan scored 2. And it was one of those Muirton Park, and a big sort of terraces, huge crowd. So he was a very good goal scorer, and probably underrated from the point of view of now. I think you would probably have teams paying big money for him. Yeah, certainly there's a few perms and semi-perms going on there as well. And just what I'd like to point out is George Tulloch, the goalkeeper. It's one of the smallest goalkeepers I've ever seen. He
shouldn't really be in the back row.
No. Front row. Front row for that.
It wouldn't surprise me if he's the smallest player in the entire squad.
He's looking like it. He's I thought the rule always should be like, if your goalkeepers, that you wouldn't have them in the team photo if they were not of a certain size. So that's a bit.
Unless he's no standing on a bench, Andy.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe he's the tallest. That's right. But anybody else we want to pick out from there?
I had a look at the group before we came on, and it was always one of these people that I always like to kind of pride myself in thinking I'm quite good. Either good at spotting people on the sort of end of their career or on the way up. But I must admit there weren't many that I've covered a lot of St Johnstone games over the years, but there weren't many that was sort of standing out of that team.
No, Jim Morton would be the only name that stands out for me.
Don McVicker was in there as well. Partick Thistle was Don McVicker.
Don McVicker ended up, I think it's at the end of his career, same as yourself. It was like I was surprised how few I did recognise, considering they won the league as well. You think that would be. There is actually Raymond Day. Is that not one of Limmy's characters?
Yes,
yeah. So there's a Raymond Day in there who's does the whole He's the one that is a clairvoyant or something,
That's
isn't
right,
it?
yeah.
Yeah. So okay, we're just going to move on a couple. Well, we'll move on to let's not bypass this one. Page 31. So Albiston clicks at United. This is a full page set of colour photos of Man United's Arthur Albiston relaxing at home with his family. The accompanying article suggests that Arthur is a keen amateur photographer, and therefore obviously the photographs in here have to have that theme as well. So the first one has Arthur taking a photograph of his son Ross, while Ross takes a photograph back of his dad. The next one shows Arthur with a range of cameras and other equipment. Looks quite a bit there. In fact, he's even having to hold something in his mouth. And the last shows him in a family shot with his wife Elaine and Ross. I guess this sort of comes back to what we said earlier on. You know, would you get these sort of family pictures nowadays of players?
It was almost at the time, it was one of those things where this was definitely the sort of first sort of take on the sort of celebrity stuff that maybe would take off for a couple of decades after that kind of thing. But yeah, it's you wouldn't even think about it now. It's I think part of me wonders if Arthur's I got to deal with a photographer to sort of float, sell the equipment or whatever to kind of get a wee boost, to whatever business. So it was getting a name. But it is classic. It's classic shoot territory.
Yeah.
I remember actually quite a while ago when John Collins was at Celtic and going out to his house and doing one of those sort of like around the house kind of thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't photography. I think it was probably a boxing gym or whatever he had it in his. But,
yeah, probably. I've noticed Arthur's shoes just down the bottom there. That's what all the commentators and the pundits and stuff are wearing nowadays. So well ahead, with the white sole. Yeah, absolutely.
Good player. From Edinburgh as well. A really good, solid player from Man United. And
yeah. Okay, I don't want to bypass this one either, so we're on pages 34 and 35, and this is Baptisms of Fire. So Shoot asked 6 top professionals about their debut games, including Ross Jenkins of Watford, Kevin Dillon of Birmingham, David Moss of Luton Town, Dave Johnson of Everton, Tommy Burns of Celtic, Cyril Regis of West Brom. So I'm going to pick 3 of them out. And the first one is Dave Johnson of Everton. He recalls chatting to another reserve player in the first team dressing room when a number 9 shirt flew across the table, accompanied by the command, "Put that on, you're playing." This was only 45 minutes before kick-off. Harry Catterick was the manager, and the game was away at Burnley in January 1971. Everton came from behind to draw 2-2, with Johnson scoring the second. He also mentions his first Everton versus Liverpool derby and says that nothing comes close to that for nerves. Luckily, he scored the only goal in a 1-0 win. The next one up is Tommy Burns at Celtic. So Tommy Burns' baptism of fire depended on a simple question by assistant manager Sean Fallon. A question that had absolutely nothing to do with football. Luckily, Burns got it right and made his debut against Aberdeen in a critical League Cup game. Burns says, "I turned up at Celtic Park about 1:30 on Saturday, the 17th of April 1976. I was 19 at the time and more than aware of the pressure of the senior players for that game, having just been knocked off the top of the league by Rangers. Sean Fallon came over and asked me, 'What have you just had for your lunch?' I looked at him for a second and replied, 'Scrambled eggs. Why?' He said, 'You're in the team, go and get ready.' I often wonder what would have happened if I said steak and chips." I mean, that's the steak. Just even saying the steak and chips in the Shoot magazine, it just does it for me. That's a classic response. So they were going to draw 1-1 that game, but I like that one from Tommy. So the last one, Cyril Regis of West Brom. Regis will never forget his debut for West Brom in front of more than 23,000 Geordies. He says, "Just imagine it for a moment. I'm 19, barely 4 months since I was playing non-league stuff and working as an electrician, and suddenly I'm waiting to run out to St James's Park against Newcastle." Now, he'd actually already made his debut in a cup game against Rotherham where he scored twice, so he believes that might have helped him in his league debut. He continues, "Laurie Cunningham and Brian Robson scored 2 of our goals, and I made it a memorable day with the third in a 3-0 win. But make no mistake, debuts take more out of you mentally than physically." So great wee stories that are in here. I absolutely love things like that.
I remember Tommy's. I was at Tommy's debut that time. I was going to every sort of game at that point in time, and so it was one of those things that was basically, and that wasn't a successful Celtic side that he was in. Kind of came between a couple of seasons of where they were second to Rangers. But the thing why it was it was Sean Fallon who came and asked him, and I hadn't thought about it until the penny dropped. The reason it was Sean Fallon and not Jock Stein was that in the previous summer, Jock Stein had got badly injured in a car crash, almost took his life, and basically he missed an entire year. So Jock didn't go near the bench or the club or anything, and Sean had to take over the team. So that was one of those things that it was quite a bit of a steep learning curve for everybody. But Sean Fallon was one of those people who I think you only kind of recognise how good your coaching staff are when you maybe don't have them. And Sean was one of those really perfect number twos, because although he could be a very hard guy to the players, and particularly to the younger players, he was actually quite good in terms of the sort of empathy with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to move to the back page here, and we're on the super focus of Ian Wallace, Nottingham Forest. So the photograph is of Ian running away while Gary Burrows is trying to pull him back. It's a photograph I've seen many a time, and it's just unbridled joy from Ian Wallace there. So let's take a look at some of the answers. So for a car, he says a Jag XJS and a sponsored Fuego from Clifton Garage, Nottingham. And he's certainly doing his bit for the sponsorship contract there, isn't he?
Definitely.
Previous clubs, Dumbarton and Coventry. Job before turning pro. Beautiful. Apprentice boiler maker.
Don't get that anymore. That's all gone.
No, absolutely. Nickname, unsurprisingly, Wally. Favourite other teams, Rangers, Childhood Heroes, Jim Baxter and Dennis Law. Favourite food, steak. There we go. I love the favourite actor, Viv Anderson. There's got to be a backstory about that. There's got to be a backstory. Career after playing, hopefully some sort of business.
Well,
it's like
he did.
Okay, just
he ended up at a newspaper shop.
Is that right?
Dumbarton. Yeah. I interviewed him about that. He come back up to Glasgow to stay, and I can remember interviewing him in the sort of 95 or 6 for the Evening Times, and he just opened up his newspaper shop. I used to actually pay money to see him. I used to go and with my dad. Dumbarton was a sort of second team. We would maybe get in the train and go and watch. And Ian Wallace, I saw quite a bit of before he got his move down to Coventry, and then obviously Clough made him a £1 million signing for Forest. So
what you said earlier on that you've been to Kilbowie. What was your memories and recollections of Clydebank?
It's one of those great grounds for being for you could always again another ground right next to the train station. So I tell you, I know we always think we should be getting a car everywhere, but it's one of those grounds that if you're in your 20s or whatever, get a train, turn up, and used to like watching the game there. My dad actually, he had famously helped me out at one time when I was supposed to be covering a game at Kilbowie and for a local paper, and I was actually having to do a game elsewhere, Falkirk of all places, and so my dad said, my dad had retired from teaching by this time. My dad said, no, I'll do your game at Kilbowie, because the team I was covering was Partick Thistle. That was the team in my local paper. So my dad had to end up, so he loved getting at the old press box at Kilbowie, and he kind of gave me his report on the Monday morning, and I kind of went through it and sort of didn't have to correct anything. It was perfect English. But I think my dad I think that was one of the things he liked about the press box at Kilbowie, was that it was an old-fashioned one. Again, I genuinely think the way the grounds have gone with like uniformity, we have all lost the wee quirks that we had with the older grounds, and while Kobawe had plenty of flaws, it had a lot of charm as well. But the actual great bit was the old press box used to be right in front of the changing rooms. There was a wee sort of stand above next to the tunnel, and the players would come down on each almost like there'd be a home team bit and an away team sort of aisle, and basically, the press box would be in front of your changing rooms, and quite often once the game finished, if you lost, it'd be amazing how you heard the bollocking coming from the dressing room. So so my dad kind of quite liked that. Was keeping involved with school teams for years and things like that. So it was one of those things that he was basically. In fact, my dad he used to be when he was a school teacher in Glasgow. One of his players that he brought through from a schoolboy was Frank McDougall, who would be not a Clydebank legend, but he was so good at Clydebank in his one and only year, this 78, that basically St Mirren paid 150 grand for him, which at the time was a Scottish record between two clubs. And then obviously he went to Aberdeen, a huge success at Aberdeen too. So one of those things. Kobawe is one of those places that I like because it's there for all its quirks, and I think actually I think with some of the modern grounds now it's hard to tell one from the other.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, we've got to the end of the magazine, so thank you very much for joining us with that. It's been a great joy, so thank you for that. Just tell us about what's going on with yourself at the moment. What are you up to?
Well, it's like everyone else. I just had probably the strangest working year in terms of because everything's just been like surreal in terms of, because you can't actually there's a very few limited amount of games, but there's only 15 allowed to. I don't think many people know that there's a limit to the number of reporters that can get into each game, so it doesn't matter what the venue, and it doesn't matter if it's Kobawe or Celtic or Hampden, it's only 15. So the amount of games I've seen this season has not been the same, and it's been very different. It's always the teams I've seen have been. I saw a lot of St Johnstone this season, actually, ironically. But the sort of next few things for me is I've got a couple of things I'm looking forward to doing. I'm looking forward to getting involved with the Euros, and I'm lucky enough that I got quite a few foreign things that I kind of do some work for, and one of the things I'm kind of very fortunate that I'm still involved with is I'm dead fortunate I get to help choose the European Player of the Year. So if you want to get anybody from Clydebank nominated for if you think Messi's crown has definitely gone and you want to nominate somebody, now's the time to maybe.
Who do we reckon, Tom?
Nicola, since our season got ended after about 9 games or something like that, his percentage of sort of goals to games ratio is probably better than most.
Exactly. So I know, but I think everyone's just had that kind of feeling about football. I think we were all desperate to see it in any form.
Yeah.
When it came back last summer, you'd watch I'm joking, like the Albanian second division because it was on. But, I think I can honestly say, having been to a few games and covering games like at the likes of Kilmarnock or Motherwell or whatever, it's impossible without a crowd. And the lack of a crowd, it's a soulless experience. And you're sitting there in a stadium, and quite often the giveaway, like when goals go in behind the goals, it's the roar of the crowd, and the goal's in usually because that's what's told you. When there's no crowd, it's actually kind of quite difficult sometimes to see if that ball's crossed the line and is in the net. And it's just it's missing from and the cliche that football is nothing without fans is actually true, and I think it's taken until now to discover how important everybody's set of fans is. And if it's 500 going to Kobawe or 3,000 at Motherwell or 60,000 at Celtic. They all needed those numbers, and but I could say, as from a working point of view, that's been my biggest thing I could pass on. That it really has been empty, and the people I've spoken to have not enjoyed it at all.
Yeah. Well, here's the next season. Hopefully things will be much better. Well, in summer as well. Let's not wait until next season for football. Listen, thank you again for taking the time out and joining us. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Phil, for coming on.
No, thanks.
Okay.
I've really enjoyed it.
Our charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also, keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank. And thanks to Tom for being Tom.
Thanks,
as always.
Andy.
And to everyone listening, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please do the usual stuff. Share it, like it, comment on it, share it with your friends, give us some feedback online. Just get involved. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.